Welcome to Nick Sibicky's Music Production Secrets. Today is another kind of general overview of something very important, and that's the actual recording studio itself and all of the equipment that you need inside of it. For many people who are starting out, this is kind of a mystery, and they just see knobs and buttons everywhere and go, oh my god, it looks so complicated. But I'm going to try to break it down for you here. So first, I got my notebook out. Let's just do a little drawing here. At the center of the modern recording studio is going to be the computer, so I'm just going to draw something that hopefully looks like a computer. This is my computer screen. That's pretty terrible. Oh, there you go. Maybe there's a keyboard. This is a computer keyboard, not a musical keyboard. Those are your keys. This is going really poorly already. Okay, but that's your computer. Okay, so this is primarily where you're going to do most of your work and your editing, and there'll be a hard drive and stuff to actually store your data. I don't really need to go into all the different computer components, but there you go. You have a computer. Okay, in order to get any sort of sound in and out of this computer, in general what you need is an audio interface. Now many motherboards on many computers do have a microphone input and or an audio output. Actually almost all of them have audio outputs, but really in the professional studio we're looking for something just a little bit more fancy. So I'm going to draw this box over here, and you know what, let's even make it a different color. Let's make that orange. So I've got this orange box, and the primary job of this orange box, again this is called an audio interface, is to transmit analog audio signals and convert them into zeros and ones that the computer can read, and then take the zeros and ones from the computer and turn them back into analog audio signals that can then drive a pair of audio speakers, or more than a pair of audio speakers. Okay, so this is an audio interface. Sometimes this is also called that's not an A, how about ADC/DAC? And that stands for analog to digital converter, or digital to analog converter. And a lot of times you say DAC. You don't have to say DAC, just say DAC. Okay, so that's the magic box that gets audio in and out of the computer. So I'm going to plug that into the computer. And from this box, as you imagine, number one, if you're playing back audio from the computer, you need a pair of monitors, and you can call them speakers. But again, in the studio, we usually call them monitors. So there's my woofer, and there's my tweeter. We'll put another one over here. We'll have a left and right pair. Again, the drawing is exceptionally bad today, I have to say. All right, and that'll often plug into this, but it doesn't have to, okay? And then we'll talk about some other studio configurations in a moment. So if you're playing back audio from a computer, the most direct, high-quality route is going to be from your computer to your DAC and then to your monitors, okay? Let's say you want to record some audio, though. So in order to record some audio, let's say some vocals, you need a microphone. So let me attempt to draw a microphone. I'm just going to draw an ice cream cone, I think I've decided. There's my microphone. I think you guys can understand. And there's a couple different places this can go. But if you have one of these audio interfaces that have microphone preamplifiers on it, in other words, it'll accept XLR cable type inputs and amplify the signal, you can plug that right into your ADC. Or analog to digital converter, right? It'll take the analog microphone signal, convert it to zeros and ones, so it can be recorded into the computer. That's easy enough, but what if you want to be able to play some piano and record MIDI into a computer? Well, then you need something called a MIDI controller, or at least a MIDI compatible keyboard. So let me draw my this is going to be a piano keyboard. It's probably not going to look like one, but we're going to try. So here's the keys. Oh man, that second was bad. I'm still, well, first of all, I'm very artistically non-inclined, just visually at least. And second, I'm using my relatively new Wacom tablet here. And if you guys actually watch people who are good at making these videos, they'll actually be able to draw things and have them look like things, and mine do not. As you can see, but this is supposed to be a piano keyboard. There's my black notes on top, and there's my white notes. And again, this is called a MIDI. Well, it's actually called a MIDI controller, or a piano keyboard, or synthesizer. All these things are often MIDI compatible. And often, most, again, audio interfaces, do you guys see how important this box is becoming, will accept and output MIDI information. Whoops. So we're going to take our MIDI device and we're going to plug it into that same box that we're plugging everything else into. You can see this is sort of like this can be the central hub of the system if we want it to be. And here's the thing about MIDI. If this hooks up via MIDI cable, I'll spend some more time talking about this in a MIDI specifications video. But if we actually want to use this box to play our keyboard for us, then we'll need to hook up another cable coming out of this box and into our MIDI controller. So we need MIDI is one way only, so we need to hook up 2 cables if we want it to communicate back and forth. However, a lot of MIDI controllers today are actually instead bypassing this whole thing, and you actually just plug straight into the computer via USB. And one of the ones that I use in my own studio is certainly like that. Although actually I think a lot of the ones we use at the college studios that I run, we actually use MIDI cables for a lot of stuff. Okay, so here's your most basic studio setup if you want to have basic high quality playback as well as high quality recording and MIDI control. There's another way we could set this up if you have a mixing board. And mixing boards are really just sort of like an audio routing station. They don't really get you a whole lot here unless you want to just have just more control and just more options for how you want to hook up your studio. But let's show you what a studio looks like that has a mixing board. And in my own studio, I use an analog mixing board as part of my setup. Again, it's really just a convenience. If you have a good audio interface, you really don't need one. But certainly my own I do, and as well as the college studios that I also run, we use them there too. So it's a useful tool. Don't feel like you have to have one. All right, so let's draw this again. So while I'm at purple, let's add our MIDI controller. So this is my MIDI keyboard again. You guys can imagine that's that. And let's draw our computer. I think we used that color. Nope, that's a darker color, but that's still the computer. This is a darker brand. Maybe this is an Alienware machine here. Right, so there's my computer and the screen and the keyboard there. I'm still going to have an audio interface, but you'll see how this will perhaps be a little bit different. So that's my ADC/DAC. Let's draw some monitors. Oh, they're much smaller this time. I guess we only got the 5-inch woofers in our second studio setup. And we'll still have microphones, but let's first draw the new mixing board. So let's make this new mixing board, let's make it black. So a lot of mixing boards are pretty black. And mixing boards, again, are just going to allow us to route audio. So instead of plugging my microphone directly into my analog to digital converter here, I might plug it into my mixing board. And here's my faders on my mixing board. Those are really big faders, I know. All right, so here are the fader parts. All right, the mixing board has all these knobs. I'm going to show you guys some pictures of mixing boards and all these equipment here in the second half of this video, so you actually see what it looks like rather than my horrible drawing. I'm just trying to demonstrate how to hook it all up. Maybe I'm doing this in the wrong order. Maybe I should show you pictures first and then show you how to hook it all up. But I'm assuming that you guys already know a little bit of this, so you should be able to follow along. All right, so I got some microphones. Maybe I have a whole bunch of microphones. Maybe one's on the singer, a couple on the guitar, maybe we got some strings in there, maybe a few more background singers. Anyway, they're all going to come back here and plug in to the back of this board. And again, if you have a lot of input channels on your audio interface, you can do it this way too. Again, this is really just an alternative way to set it up. You don't have to do it this way. And actually, really in my own studio, I don't do it this way. I actually run everything through my preamplifiers and then my DAC, and then actually I'll have the DAC output to the mixing board, and then the mixing board will go back to the DAC. And I don't want to talk about why I do this in my own studio, but it gives me a lot of flexibility and a lot of other cool advanced mixing secrets. When we get a little bit further advanced, we'll talk about why you might want to do something like that. Anyway, today's just the basic. All right, so let's go back to our black, and then we're going to plug in our mixing board into our interface, like this. And maybe we'll have at least 2 channels coming out of it. And so what might happen here is, let's say I was going to record a live gig. I could set up all these microphones, do a live mix using my mixing board. This will let me adjust the different volume levels of each of these microphones and set them up and maybe do a little EQ. And you be able to use this box before it actually gets recorded into the computer, right? So all these other cables that we drew before are still present, right? The computer is hooked up to this box, and this box might be hooked up to the monitors. But since we have this box and the mixing board hooked up, it also might be useful to actually have the monitors hooked up to the mixing board. And this is what we do in my studio and all the college studios, actually, just because, again, the mixing board is usually right at your fingertips. It's got all these basically giant volume sliders on it. So if you want to just have another giant volume slider, use one of the sliders or one of the master buses, have those go to your monitors directly, right? So instead of trying to turn little knobs on a little box somewhere in the corner of your studio setup, If you put your mixing board out somewhere where it's easy to reach, you have just the best volume knob in the entire world for when you play back any sort of audio. The mixing board isn't going to do anything for us for MIDI, so we still need to plug in our MIDI keyboard into our audio interface. So this is another possible setup, okay? And this is how you might set up a project studio. I don't want to get into specifics as far as what ins and outputs to hook up, but again, this is the general list of equipment that you're looking to acquire. If you don't have any of this equipment, you might want to, these are the things you have to start thinking about, let's say that. Okay, so let's close out of this window for a moment. And I've just loaded up some pictures of these things. I'm going to Sweetwater.com site. They're an internet retailer. We buy a lot of stuff through them. I've been to their facility, know a couple of guys that work there. And in addition, the college deals with them a lot for their studios. So, they're just really big, really efficient. They're a good place to check out. Anyway, the first picture that you see here, it shouldn't be anything of a surprise. This is a studio monitor. Here's one of my favorite types of studio monitors. These are the Dynaudio BM6As. I really like these. These are ones that I like to mix on. You don't need something quite as fancy as this, but just some points I want to make about these monitors, especially if you're the type of person who's asking, well, I have these great computer speakers. Why do I need these? Well, there's a few reasons. Number one, these monitors are going to be acoustically balanced across, almost all frequency regions that you can hear. They don't have an extreme low end, but at the same time, they're going to play lots of frequencies that your little computer speakers will barely be able to put out. Second, and more importantly, and here's the thing that, here's the big secret of this entire lecture here, at least regarding monitors. Most people don't realize this, but it's not just about can your speaker make all the different frequencies and at the correct volume. It's also, is there a phase difference between those frequencies? In other words, speaker cones and amplifiers will actually react more sluggishly or more quickly to different frequencies. And a lot of this has to do with whether or not a monitor is tuned or is ported. And some of these monitors will have these giant big holes on the back, essentially, where you'll be able to get lower frequencies out, but it actually ruins the timing of everything. You're actually almost resonating the whole speaker. So if you're looking for really high quality, really refined speakers, I think the general choice is to get something that doesn't have ports on it. So if you're using monitors with big giant holes in the back, especially on the woofers, the subwoofer parts, and again, really low subwoofers will almost always be ported, but at least as far as your desktop monitors, you're probably actually getting a little bit of smearing across the time region. Now, it's very imperceptible, but it's worth pointing out. So, again, I favor unported designs over ported ones. The benefit of having a giant hole in the back of this, having a port, is that it allows you to actually play much lower frequencies than you normally would be able to, but it sort of throws off the higher ones. So anyway, that's the general gist, okay? So if you're looking for monitors, again, I would favor unported ones over ported ones. Though it's very easy to get tied up and think, oh, the ported ones must be better because they can play louder and they'll have much lower bass. But there's a price to that type of design. Okay, but anyway, having a really good pair of studio monitors is something you need to invest in if you're taking music seriously. You will not really start to develop your ears as refined as possible as you need in order to be a recording studio engineer until you can really listen to music. And monitors are something you're going to keep for a while. This is not a piece of gear you're going to buy for 2 years, throw out and get another one, assuming that you buy a good one. If you buy a crappy one to begin with, 2 years you might outgrow it. The next piece of gear we've talked about a lot in the last video, and this is an example of an audio interface. Again, this is the one I use in my own studio. We also have these set up in the college studios. You don't need something quite this fancy. I've talked about this a little bit before, I think in the MIDI video, but if you just look at this is the front, and there's actually a second unit, and this is the back. So these are what we call one-space rack units, and these are 19-inch racks. These are pretty standard anywhere you go in the world of audio and video. You don't necessarily need a rack to put this in, but it's much more secure and looks a lot nicer if you do actually own a 19-inch rack. And usually when you get a rack, you'll have a few things in it. One of the I have a few racks, but one of the ones, the one that contains this interface is actually built right into my desk, which is both good and bad. I'm actually starting to think it's more annoying than it's worth. I'd rather have it separated away from my computer, I think. But some things to point out. Number one, this one actually has microphone preamps on the front. It actually has 4 preamps right there, so I can plug in 4 microphones just directly. And it supplies phantom power and individual gain controls. On the back, number one, you can see it has MIDI both out and in, so it's not just an audio interface, it also is a MIDI interface. This particular box is Firewire. It has something called word clock, and if we're hooking up lots of different digital devices in the studio, you can use word clock to basically keep them all in sync. So that's important. And then it has lots of outputs and just lots of inputs, both analog across here at the bottom, but as well as a lot of digital here at the top. Each of these digital inputs actually can basically transfer about 8 channels worth of data. So we're really looking at, about 16 analogs here, plus 34 digital ones right there. So this box is really flexible, allows you to do a lot of different things, as well as headphones on the front. And again, the major thing that this box does, here we'll go to a different picture of it, this is what it looks like when it's in the rack, is just convert analog audio to digital audio and back again. That's it. But it does it at a very high quality that is really usable and just really fun and easy to use. All right, next piece of gear you should consider getting for yourself is a MIDI controller. Here's an example. This is a 61 key made by M Audio. Actually, I have one of these sitting in front of me right now, though I'm thinking about selling it. There are some things about this box that annoy me. It's a little too flexible for its own good, I think, is my own feeling. I really got it because I loved the feeling of these MIDI faders. I thought these were great underneath your fingertips. They have a lot of resistance to them. But that's a minor detail. Really what this box does, it allows you to send and receive MIDI data. You can play keys, you can send it control signals through these. It's got some drum pads on it, some pitch bend. It does all those things, plugs into your computer via USB. I could plug it in through MIDI. If we look at the back, is there a picture of the back? I think so, right there. It's got the Sweetwater logo right there over where the part that's important. Right there you can see it has MIDI inputs and outputs, so you can actually send and receive MIDI data directly into this box. You don't need to plug it in via USB, although plugging in USB is very nice because it's also powered via USB. So if you just plug in one USB cable, you get your power, you get your input and your output. If you don't want to use the USB, you have to actually plug in 3 cables to get all of those features and functions. All right, we also just talked about in our little diagram the mixing board. This is an analog mixing board. I like this board a lot. This is made by a company called Mackie, and they're right out of pretty local to here in Washington State in the United States, which is about where I'm actually very close to broadcasting here from. And what this board is basically is it's an audio routing hub for analog audio. So it has across the back here, let's open that up. Here's all the analog inputs and outputs. We just have a lot of more routing capability. It's got 16 microphone preamplifiers, so if you can run up to 16 mics at a time into this board is often maybe a little bit better used in live mixing situations than the studio. But again, the microphone preamplifiers here are relatively nice, and I like the feeling of the board and the layout. Everything makes sense. It's it's just another tool. But again, if you're just starting out, I would consider this to be completely optional. You don't need this in your studio. So I'm sort of going down the line here as far as what I think are priorities as far as hardware. If you're starting out in making a project studio, again, I think monitors really something you should really devote a lot of your money to, a lot of your budget, followed by an audio interface and a good solid MIDI controller that you're happy to use and like using. This is our first real optional unit as part of setting up a recording studio. I've also loaded here something that looks a lot like a mixing board. This is actually called a digital control surface. And while it may look like a mixing board and actually work like a mixing board, it does something very fundamentally different. In the case of this box, instead of routing all of our audio, of our analog audio to it and then having the mixing board change it and then route it back, what this board actually just allows us to do is actually use mixing board-like functions within our software. In other words, I plug this into the computer, and these are all buttons and faders and dials here. They're designed to very easily let me turn up and down tracks and music and panning, apply EQ, apply effects. You got your start, your stop, play, record buttons here very quickly and easily. So instead of using the mouse to go around and click everything or learning all the quick keys on your computer keyboard, often learning one of these boards is a really great alternative because it just speeds up your workflow. It makes it a much more tactile process, much more hands-on, and it's also just fun. So this is like a mixing board. It kind of looks like this in certain ways. You see the faders across the bottom and the knobs and the buttons. Same thing kind of here, but again, instead of being designed to edit analog audio directly and change analog audio, it's actually designed to interface with your software. I would say this is completely optional if you're just starting out. Don't get one of these until you feel like you know what you're doing and you feel like you have a legitimate need for one of these, because these are relatively expensive, I think, for what you get. One nice thing about one cool thing about boards like this is often, and this one is true for this one, these faders are motorized. So let's say, you record a track and you've got this mapped to your guitar and your bass and your drums and your vocalist, and in one part during the song you fade in the guitar and then it fades out. Well, every time you play the song back, this mixing board will actually, sort of ghost-like move the fader up and move it back without you touching it. So it's all very automated, looks like a robot sort of doing its thing. And it is. I mean, it's just sort of a big dumb robot just playing through your music and allowing you to edit it at any given point. So these are very cool, but again, completely not necessary for your success in the studio. If your studio starts to get really big, and we have I run one studio that uses, it's about we have 4. How many patch bays do we have? I can't remember if it's 4 or 5. I don't remember. But anyway, the point is this actually has 24 channels of inputs and outputs, and that's it. And this will just let you link different parts to your studio together very quickly. As your studio gets bigger and you get more gear, you might start noticing that you have to acquire more and more cables, and then whenever you want to reconfigure something, you need to go back and crawl behind big machines and rack units and unplug and plug things back in. Well, this patch bay here prevents that. What you do is you plug in everything into your studio into the patch bay, and whenever you want to plug in, let's say, your mixing board on channel 5 and have it go to your, we'll say, compressor on channel 8, you actually just take a little tiny cable and you plug right here on the front 5 into 8, and that's all you have to do. While on the back, I think this is a picture of the back. Nope, that's the front. Are you the back? That's the back. You actually have already plugged in all the gear on the back. It looks just like the front, and it's just making the connection between whatever 2 pieces of gear you plug in. So again, if you're a project studio and you're relatively small, having one of these is not at all necessary, but again, as you get bigger and you get a lot more gear, this will, it's something to look into, and just know that you have at your disposal to acquire as a patch bay. And actually, the one that I got, I kind of feel proud about how I got it, because I got it on one of the Guitar Center super sale, Black Friday kind of things, like Madness Rush things, and I bought my patch bay for a penny. On one of those super awesome sale days, which I'm fairly proud of. You have to fight off some people for it. It was more fun than anything else, I guess. You will not be able to buy a patch bay for a penny. I can guarantee you that. So if anyone does or acquires one for less than a penny, I'll be very impressed. We didn't really talk a whole lot about microphones, but again, this is actually, I should probably move these up further in the studio optional. I was trying to go from most important to least important as far as what you need to acquire. These should be the microphones. Your microphone collection, let's say, should be further up. Again, if you buy nice quality microphones, they will last you a long time, 20 to 30 years in most cases, if you buy nice ones. If you buy cheap ones, I would just expect that you will outgrow them and want some nicer ones. I'll probably do a 1 or 2 full videos just on microphones by themselves, so I won't really talk a whole lot about specifics in this one, but just know that this is something that you should be adding and thinking about to your arsenal. One last thing that I would consider either necessary or optional, depending on what your audio interface is capable of, is dedicated microphone preamps and channel strips. And this is just a Focusrite 8-channel mic preamp, and if we actually look on the back of it, there we go. You actually see it has 8 microphone inputs here, and basically that's all it is. It's just going to allow you to take microphones and plug them all into one place, and you can set all the gain and all the settings for them here on the front. And then you can run all of these channels into your audio interface, or this one also has an optional digital output card you can buy for it, and you can put it right out to your computer directly if you have an ADAT on your computer. Again, if you don't have enough microphone inputs on your audio interface, and you don't have a mixing board that gives you extra ones, this is often the type of thing you're looking at buying. And these come in all different qualities. You can buy really bad mic preamps, you can buy really good mic preamps, and anywhere in between. Although I would say, in most cases, the difference between a $500 mic preamp and a $3,000 mic preamp is very, very slight. So this is it's a really good place to burn a lot of your money. But again, I wouldn't put it near the top of the list as far as priorities go, as if you're budgeting for a new studio. Okay, so I think this kind of does the overview of what you need and actually to run a studio. If we just go back here for a second, again, we'll revisit my horrible drawings. Bare minimum, we're talking about a computer, some sort of box, an audio interface that will convert analog to digital and digital to analog as far as your audio. Probably has MIDI on it in case you need MIDI. If you're doing recording, you need some microphones. If you're going to be recording some MIDI data or using synthesizers and samplers, you need some sort of MIDI sequencer. And perhaps above all, other than the computer, I would highly recommend getting yourself a good pair of monitors.